Have you heard the latest buzz about rebate checks possibly making their way to Americans? Recently, an email sent out on behalf of the president caught a lot of attention because it mentioned the idea of rebate payments tied to tariff revenues. Now, if you were one of the people who actually received that email, you probably know what I'm talking about. But if not, don't worry. I'm going to break down exactly what was in it, what it really means, and what we can actually expect moving forward. This email wasn't just a random note. It had a very eye-catching subject line, and the body of the message teased the possibility of direct rebate checks going back to the people as a form of bonus payments. The reasoning behind this was connected to the record amount of money the government has been collecting from tariffs. Understandably, this made a lot of people curious. Does this mean more money could actually end up in the hands of everyday Americans? Before jumping to conclusions, it's important to understand where all of this came from. Just a couple of weeks ago, the president was asked about rebates before leaving on a trip overseas. His comments at that time sparked a wave of discussion, and soon after, Senator Josh Hawley officially introduced legislation known as the American Worker Rebate Act of 2025. This proposal suggested sending out rebate checks to the majority of Americans, potentially covering 80 to 85% of households. So, when this email went out mentioning rebate checks, people naturally assumed that these payments had already been finalized or were on their way. But here's the truth. The email was actually a fundraising message. That's right. It was designed to grab attention, get people clicking, and encourage donations. While it certainly talked about rebate checks and tariffs, it didn't officially announce that payments were approved or guaranteed. Now, this might sound disappointing, but there's more to unpack here. Let's look closely at why rebate checks are even being talked about in the first place. Over the past year, the United States has been pulling in record-breaking revenue from tariffs. In fact, the numbers show that the government is now collecting tens of billions of dollars per month, with projections reaching as high as $300 billion per year. That's a massive amount of money. The idea behind the American Worker Rebate Act is that instead of letting all of that money remain in government accounts, a portion should be redistributed back to the people who, in many ways, are indirectly paying those tariffs through higher consumer prices. In simple terms, we're seeing higher costs in stores partly because of tariffs, and this proposal is saying that some of those revenues should circle back to the public in the form of rebate checks. Of course, we have to be realistic here. While the idea sounds good, it's not officially happening yet. This is still in the proposal stage, and legislation has to go through multiple steps before anything is finalized. Even though the president publicly supported the concept and Senator Hawley turned it into a bill, we're still in the waiting period to see if Congress actually pushes it through. Interestingly, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. Earlier this year, there was talk of what was called a 5,000 Doge dividend. At that time, a similar type of email went out teasing payments that never actually materialized. The reason? The money just wasn't there. In that case, the savings and revenue weren't strong enough to make it feasible. With tariff revenues, however, the money is undeniably rolling in, which is why this time feels different. So here's the bottom line. Yes, there's a real legislative proposal on the table called the American Worker Rebate Act of 2025. Yes, the president himself has voiced support for it. And yes, billions of dollars in tariff revenue are actively being collected. But no, the checks are not approved yet. The email that made headlines recently was primarily a fundraising tool, not an official confirmation of payments. That's where things stand right now. Now let's step back and think about what this could mean for everyday Americans if it actually moves forward. According to the details of the proposal, the rebate checks would be around $600 per person, reaching the vast majority of households. Imagine what that could do for families struggling with higher costs of living. Groceries, gas, utilities, and housing have all become more expensive, so a rebate could provide at least some short-term relief. Beyond the numbers, though, this proposal touches on a bigger debate. Should money collected from tariffs be kept by the government, or should it be shared with the public? Supporters argue that since consumers are the ones ultimately paying higher prices due to tariffs, it's only fair that they receive a share of the revenue. Critics, on the other hand, worry that rebate checks might just be a political move rather than a long-term solution. And that brings us to another important point: timing. Whenever big ideas like this surface, especially during major political seasons, they can sometimes be used to gain support rather than serve as fully developed policies. That's why many people remain cautious. While the idea of rebate checks is exciting, it's crucial to separate what's actually in motion from what's being teased in fundraising emails. One thing is certain: this conversation isn't going away. As long as tariff revenues continue to grow, there will be ongoing discussions about how that money should be used. Some will say it should go toward reducing the national debt, others will push for infrastructure or social programs, and still others will argue for direct payments to citizens. The American Worker Rebate Act of 2025 falls into that last category. Now, let's circle back to the email itself because it's a great example of how information can be both attention-grabbing and confusing at the same time. Many people who saw it thought it meant checks were already approved, but as I explained, it was a fundraising tactic. This is important to understand because in today's world, emails and headlines can spread quickly, and people can end up with the wrong impression. Always look for official confirmation before assuming that payments are guaranteed. So where does this leave us? We're at a point where the groundwork has been laid. The proposal exists. The revenue stream is real. The president supports the idea. But the legal approval hasn't happened yet. Until it does, nothing is finalized. That means, for now, we wait to see how Congress responds and whether the American Worker Rebate Act gains enough support to move forward. As always, I'll be following these developments closely and keeping you updated. This is one of those stories that could have a major impact on millions of households if it goes through. Whether it ends up being $600 checks or some other form of rebate, the fact that this discussion is happening at the highest levels of government is already significant. In the meantime, it's important for all of us to stay informed and cautious. Exciting headlines can create a lot of hope, but the details matter. Right now, the details tell us this is still just a proposal, not an approved program. So, if you've been hearing people talk about rebate checks as if they're already on the way, remember this: they are not guaranteed yet. The possibility is real, the proposal is real, but the approval is still pending. To wrap this up, here are the key points you should take away. 1. An email sent on behalf of the president mentioned rebate checks, but it was actually a fundraising message. 2. The idea of rebate checks comes from the American Worker Rebate Act of 2025, introduced by Senator Josh Hawley. 3. This act proposes sending out $600 rebate checks to about 80 to 85% of Americans. 4. The money for these checks would come from the record-breaking tariff revenues currently being collected. 5. The president supports the idea, but it has not been officially approved or distributed yet. 6. The conversation is ongoing, and the outcome depends on how Congress moves forward with the proposal. For now, all we can do is stay tuned, watch the progress, and be ready to see how this develops. If it passes, it could mean real financial relief for millions of Americans. Until then, patience is key.